Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the main object big book study of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am an alcoholic. My name is David, and once again, a blessing to be here with you all. I'm going to ask our friend Sandy to read the AA preamble. Um, let's see. Sorry, folks. I am having. It's not showing up on my screen. Let's see. We're going to try that, see if that works. And okay. Are you able to see the preamble?
I
Sandy?
can see it.
Could somebody.
Yes.
I don't know if Sandy can make it, so could someone read it?
I'm an alcoholic,
Go
and
read it.
my name is Jacqueline. The AA Preamble, Alcoholics Anonymous, is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contribution. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy. Neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Thank you.
Jacqueline, thank you so much. Um, and so I'm going to ask everyone now to join me in inviting God into this meeting by reciting the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. We are a line by line big book study. I know we have some newer folks here, so just to orient you on what we do is we go uh, very slowly, I will tell you, through the book, but we are, by doing that, what we're trying to do is really unlocks the deeper meaning and impact of the text. And I think so far that has been helpful for people. What we do is we break the text down into 5 separate categories. I'll see if I can bring those up. Oh, there we go. All right. And those categories are questions, directions and explanations, promises, warnings, and history. And the colors that you see next to each one are just arbitrary highlighter colors that I chose to use. So if you're following along and you want to highlight your text, you can choose those colors or you can choose your own. So it doesn't really matter. But it doesn't matter that you follow those colors. And so what I will do is I will share until about 7 a.m. I might go a minute or two longer because I will tell you folks, we have a tremendous amount of ground to cover today. And so I'll share till about 7. And at that time, we'll open it up for everybody else's shares or thoughts on the text. And um, and if you'll forgive me for just a second, I want to also post the notes for today's meeting along with the questions for reflection so that we have that. There we go. And is that, yes. Okay, there we are. That stuff's in the chat. And the other thing that I want people to know is I used to just post this in the chat, but I want everyone to know that this meeting is being recorded. It is being recorded for audio only, so we are within the bounds of the traditions. And also, what we're going to do from now on, since some folks still may not be comfortable in having their voices recorded, because we archive them on YouTube, so people who can't make the meeting or want to review it can go back and listen again. So what I'm going to do is also edit or stop the recording, and so that participants' shares are not recorded or posted. So I just want to make people aware of that. So it'll only be the stuff that I'm going through. And today, as I said, we are on page 8. We are in the 7th section of Bill's story. I'm calling this section Passing His Experience, and we'll see in a moment why it's called that. We are going to go through all the way through page 9 to about the middle of page 10, where Bill mentions Winchester Cathedral again. And just to, I want to sort of set the stage for people, because here we are, we're at a time when for Bill, by now all hope is gone. He has pretty much fully resigned himself to the fact that his alcoholism is going to continue. He cannot stop drinking, and it's going to kill him. And he really feels that that end is coming soon. So in the midst of all this, he's visited by an old drinking buddy, his friend, Ebby T, and to Bill's initial shock and disappointment, Ebby's sober. And he shares with Bill how adopting a spiritual plan for living has saved him. Now, because Bill's completely hopeless, he's willing to listen, and that willingness allows Bill to experience God's grace and consider, at this point, just consider a spiritual solution to his problems, and that is, we've been talking about the 4 commitments that we see both Bill and Bob go through at the beginning of their sobriety, and this is the 4th commitment, which is a spiritual plan for living. So anyway, jumping now to the text on page 8, this first paragraph that begins near the end of that bleak November, I have highlighted in pink that means it's a warning. Near the end of that bleak November, I sat drinking in my kitchen. With a certain satisfaction, I reflected there was enough gin concealed about the house to carry me through that night and the next day. My wife was at work. I wondered whether I dared hide a full bottle of gin near the head of our bed. I would need it before daylight. And you can really see, I think if we're tracking Bill's story on a trajectory from high to low, this is about the lowest point. He is at his absolute lowest point. All hope is gone, and his impending doom or death is it's become normalized for himself. He's not surprised anymore. And the next couple sentences I have highlighted in green for either instructions or explanations, and I'll explain that in a moment. My musing was interrupted by the telephone. The cheery voice of an old school friend asked me if he might come over. He was sober. Now that's in italics. So that really, he wants that to jump out at us. And by that we can take, it's somewhat unusual that this friend, who we later learn is Ebby T, is sober. It was years since I could remember his coming to New York in that condition. I was amazed. Rumor had it he had been committed for alcoholic insanity. I wondered how he escaped. All of that I have in green as instruction. Now, why I have that as instruction is we're really, for Ebby, because I tried to look through this section through two pairs of eyes. One was Bill's and one was Ebby's. And what is Ebby doing now? Ebby is carrying the message. And he's doing it really without knowledge or regard for how it may be received. He is just carrying the message. And he knew he had a pretty good idea that Bill was probably still drinking, and he may have even heard that Bill had had some misfortune as a result of his drinking. So the reason I have that highlighted in green is it really speaks to Ebby just carrying the message. The rest of this paragraph I have highlighted in pink for a warning. Of course, we would have dinner, and then I could drink openly with him, unmindful of his welfare. I thought only of capturing the spirit of other days. There was that time we had chartered an airplane to complete a jag. His coming was an oasis in this dreary desert of futility, the very thing, an oasis. Drinkers are like that. And again, all a warning. The reason we can see, and sort of Bill points that out too, unmindful of his welfare. Bill is immersed in, there's a phrase they use like self-pity oozing from every pore. I think it might be safe to say that that's where Bill is finding himself at this moment. And in addition, he's really just mired in that fog of self-centeredness. And so no regard for Ebby. Ebby for Bill at this point, think about this, is not even considered to be a full person. He's a tool. He's a tool that Bill uses in order to recapture a feeling he had long ago. And I think about when I read that, when I read it, I thought about how many times did I not see people as real people, but as tools or as just a means to an end. And just so you know, I think I put it in the chat. There's a link to some info about Ebby T. There is also a link that details the story of Ebby and Bill chartering that. They didn't just charter an airplane to complete a jag. It was, flight was a new thing. I forget that it was a town in Vermont. They were opening the airport. It was like the inaugural day for the airport. And so there was a celebration there, and somehow Bill and Ebby were the first ones to land, unexpectedly. They sort of invited themselves to the party, got out of the plane, and fell face down on the tarmac. And if you follow that link, it'll tell you the story. So the next paragraph is, I think, an important one because it speaks of a promise. The door opened, and there he stood, fresh-skinned and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? Ebby, except for the phone call, Ebby has not said a word. But Bill is struck by there's something different about him. What I want to do, if we can, is jump for a second, because this helps really drive home another piece of our text. If we could jump to page 18, and I just want to touch very briefly on kind of setting the stage for where Ebby may be coming from. I'm near the bottom, the fourth paragraph, but the ex-problem drinker who has found his solution, who is properly armed with the facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. Here's where the big payoff is for me. That the man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty, that he obviously knows what he is talking about. Here we go, folks. That his whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he is a man with a real answer. That he has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatever except the sincere desire to be helpful, that there are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. These are conditions we have found most effective. After such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again. Let's keep that image and those instructions in mind as we go back and read through Ebby's approach to Bill and see how Ebby really embodies that. And what we see throughout this exchange between these two men is that Ebby never tries to sell or convince. He simply shares his experience, and already we have seen that his whole deportment shouts that he's not just selling a new fad or idea. He is sharing an inward transformation that Bill can see already. So, moving on. I pushed a drink across the table. He refused it. Disappointed but curious, I wondered what had got into the fellow. He wasn't himself. Come, what's this all about? I queried. He looked straight at me and simply but smiling, he said, I've got religion. So, this is, to be sure, this is where for Bill the visit shifts. And maybe initially not even in a good way. Because what does he say in the next sentence? In paragraph, paragraph 5 on that page. I was aghast. Bill is shocked. It's the feeling. Imagine a friend comes over and invites, and I hope I don't offend anybody with this, but Bill comes over. Imagine somebody knocks on the door. Can I come over and borrow sugar? And they say, oh, by the way, I've just joined Amway. And out comes the PowerPoint or the presentation, and oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? And you can imagine Bill having that feeling. And we're going to find out there's reasons for that. And so the next paragraph is all warning, and Bill is a bit cynical about this. And
David, what were those other lines?
I just have them blank. So, yeah, that I pushed a drink across the table all the way to I got religion. I mean, you might want to look at them as green, but I just have them blank. They didn't jump out to me as one thing or another. But definitely paragraph 5, the I was aghast paragraph, that's all warning. And but interestingly, what we're going to see, well, let me read it and then I'll comment. So that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now I suspected a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yes, the old boy was on fire all right, but bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching. So Ebby's not going to drink. So at this point, Bill's a little taken back by that, but he immediately recovers from that and does the equation that a lot of us have done in our drinking days. Well, that just means more for me. And so he can. So from Bill's point of view, Ebby could recite the alphabet for all he cared at this point. He's just going to get a good buzz on. And But interestingly, now we'll see that his shock and defensiveness give way to a mild, what is initially a mild curiosity. Um, that's heightened by the fact that Ebby is sharing not to convince, but he's really sharing to honor the gift or the grace he has received. So the next two sentences I have as green direction, and I think an important direction when we're thinking about carrying the message. But he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how two men had appeared in court persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. Matter-of-fact way, he just told the story. He did not sensationalize the story. And think about that. I can think about the number of times I've tried to like in my mind, I've told my story, and there's this John Williams soundtrack, like Indiana Jones soundtrack playing in the beginning, underneath it, because it's so big and adventurous, and it never works. Da 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 da. And of course, we'll edit my singing out of this as well, just so you know. Anyway, they told of a simple religious idea and practical program of action. That sentence I have double highlighted in as direction and also as a promise. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. Bill is intrigued. And notice, again, how they're framing it. Ebby has just told the story. He has not really tried to sell anything at this point. And the other thing that really became apparent to me that I never considered before was that the role of this is the term I'm going to use. You may use a different term or think of it differently. I'm going to use the phrase divine timing. Think about what would have happened if Ebby would have come a month before. About a month before or so, Bill was supercharged on self-knowledge, and Bill wasn't drinking. So, and it may be perhaps if Bill would have, or if Ebby would have come a month later, Bill may have not even been there. He may have been in a sanitarium by that time, or dead. But I think that notion of divine timing, which Ebby could not control, what Ebby did is just shared the message. So on to the next paragraph. Most of this is green for instruction, and I'll point out some little differences. He had come to pass his experience along to me, if I cared to have it. I was shocked but interested. Notice what Ebby does, and I think it's an important instruction. He immediately gives Bill an out. Like, hey man, I want to share with you what happened to me. You don't have to listen to it. It's only if you're up for it. But remember, Ebby's whole deportment shouts that there is something different about him. So Bill's intrigued. And the sentence, I was shocked but intrigued, I have double highlighted as instruction, but as also a promise. Certainly I was interested, for I had to be. I was hopeless. Also, instruction, and promise. Now, why do I have that as instruction? I won't jump to the page, but if we'll recall, we'll think ahead for a moment to working with others. Doesn't it say in working with others that we should be mindful of the timing when approaching a new person? Get them when they're at their most hopeless. And look at what Ebby does, is just happenstance would have it. Bill is at his most hopeless. So he's interested, he's open. Self-knowledge did not work for him. High resolve did not work for him. So ego deflation did not work for him. Even though those are three, what we're seeing, essential commitments, there is a fourth ingredient that needs to be put into the mix. So anyway, he talked for hours. Most of this, all of this paragraph is highlighted in green for instruction, except, and this is just me, except for that sentence, only because I have been guilty of oversharing at times. You know, here I want to share my experience, strength, and hope with you. Please sit down in front of this fire hydrant and let me blast you with this. But joking aside, there's what I realized, there is so much going on in this paragraph that is, I think, critical, that I totally brushed aside until I sat down and went through this basically word for word. Childhood memories rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat still on Sundays, way over there on the hillside. Oh, way over there in the hillside. There was that proffered temperance pledge I never signed. And proffered simply means to offer for acceptance. Preacher said, "Will you accept this temperance pledge?" Bill said, "I'll get back to you on that." My grandfather's good-natured contempt of some church folk and their doings. His insistence that the spheres really had their music. That phrase, the spheres had their music, it comes from Greek mythology. And I don't know if I put a link for that in there or not, but what it means, I think, which is important, is that it is the recognition that there is an underlying order or harmony to the universe. And depending on the author that you read about this, there are those who go as far as to say the Greek philosophers really believed that the planets emitted a kind of music that you could hear with your ears as they spun in their orbits. We can leave that as it is for now. I'll just read onward and then I'll come back to this because there's an important piece here. But his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen. So there's an underlying order or harmony, but Bill's grandfather said, "I'm going to determine for myself what that means for me." Think about that for a second. I'm not going to let you tell me what it should mean for me. I'm going to explore and determine that myself. The other thing that I want to point out, and this is me editorializing just a bit, is that, but his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen. That is the word denial. That is the only mention think about how many times think about how many times I've used or referred to my alcoholism through the word denial. That is the only time right there that the word denial appears in the first 164 pages of our text. So it talks about it in the 12 and 12, and I believe also in Living Sober. So I'm not just throwing out the baby with the bathwater. But what the first 164 pages uses 3 or 4 times is the word delusion, not denial. And we'll later get into why that distinction is important. His fearlessness as he spoke of these things before he died, these recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard. Okay, what is going on there? Because that is a paragraph that just sort of like glossed over me for years. And I realized what Bill is doing is Bill is reassessing, as Ebby is speaking, Bill is reassessing his relationship with God and the divine. And why is he doing that? Because Ebby, is talking at length about his spiritual experience and spiritual ideas. And what we will see time and time again is that think about I don't remember which example it is. It's one of the examples a few pages past this, where maybe they go to meet AA number 3, and he said he's a good churchman, but he had to throw out lifelong conceptions. After Bill and Bob talk to him, they're talking to him about spiritual principles. They are, when they're getting into sharing the message, they are sharing a deeply spiritual message that requires a revision of most people's relationship with God. And why is that important? Because what we are talking about in Alcoholics Anonymous is a spiritual solution to our problem. And so Ebby is causing Bill to really reconsider his relationship with God. And I'm going to read one more line and then open it up, because I know we're running a little behind schedule here, or I'm running a little behind schedule. That wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back to me. When I read about this chapter, it's specific. The book I've referenced this before, and I'll reference it again. This kind of weighty tome is called Writing the Big Book, and it is a detailed history of the writing of this book we're working with, and it talks specifically about that line right there. That wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back again. And what I want to share with you folks is the fact that the chapter that we are reading today is approximately the 4th revision of Bill's story. And this revision was not edited or revised by Bill. If you'll remember, we talked about they hired a professional editor, and the members had concern that they wanted to share a spiritual message, but not too spiritual, because they didn't want to alienate people, but they wanted to introduce the idea of a spiritual solution. So there is something that happened at Winchester Cathedral that got deleted out of the last revision. And I think it's important to read it. So I went back to the original manuscript, And normally, I think this is probably the only time I'll do this is go back to the original manuscript. But here's what happened for Bill. This is Bill's writing. We were in England. I stood in Winchester Cathedral with head bowed in the presence of something I never felt before. Now, this is prior to, just FYI, this is prior to seeing the tombstone, the Hampshire Grenadier. Okay. And Bill's starting the question because it's, he's there getting ready to go over and fight in World War I. Where was the God of the preachers? Across the channel, thousands were perishing that day. Why did he not come? Suddenly, in that moment of darkness, he was there. I felt an enveloping, comforting presence with a capital P. Tears stood in my eyes. I had a glimpse of the great reality. Bill had a dramatic spiritual experience at Winchester Cathedral. He had a first-hand recognition of the presence of God, so that it stayed with him. Now think about this, because we've always thought about the moment in Towns Hospital being when Bill first really experiences God like that. But he didn't. It's not the first time, it's the second time. And Ebby's telling a story, and that's what Bill is referring to when he says that wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back again. That's what came back for him, not just reading the tombstone. So Bill is wondering, how real is this God that I've written off and that I experienced? And with that, I am going to open it up. Thanks for letting me share. I just want to put out there, I did come up with 3 questions for reflection, and you can think about these, share about them, or share about anything else that we've talked about today. First one is, what qualities in others interested or attracted me when I was new? Remember, there were qualities in Ebby that attracted Bill. What role, if any, did divine timing play in me getting sober? Today, what most attracts me about a spiritual plan of living? Or, what is my strongest reservation about a spiritual plan of living? And I'm here to tell you, even with a long time sober, you can have great reservations about a spiritual plan for living, but we'll talk about that another time. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you.